Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teachers in the Dungeon. I'm Tom Gross, sitting here in the dungeon with Dan Ream. Hello, Dan.
I am back.
You are back from
another dungeon.
Well, I was about to say from Kansas City, but that's not what the dungeon was.
No. The cavernous, empty convention center where I was grading AP exams.
I can't think of anything less than I would want to do. I think I'd rather fight a horde of giant spiders than to do that. But good for you in doing that. And sounds like you became really proficient and learned some things that you can put into your practice next year in your classroom.
Yeah. It was definitely useful. I mean, this isn't... Teachers are our audience, not necessarily AP teachers, but if you are an AP teacher, definitely do the reading 1 year, make yourself do it. It is a game changer, it really is.
Cool.
Plus, I found a game store within walking distance of the convention center. Where the owners make their own dice and have dice making classes, which I thought was cool.
Oh, nice. So, and you said you kind of walked in as one was getting started.
Yeah, there was I think a family. There's 4 or 5 people there that were sitting down, so... I was thinking, I want to make some dice. Is there a spot? How late are you going? I might stay here, but I didn't
that's fantastic. Well, I'm glad you had a chance to get away for a little while for work, but still a getaway's a getaway, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you had some big news.
Yes, I don't normally do the news segment, and so I was excited. You've got some
great news, though.
So our friend Alan Morris, artist Alan Morris, we interviewed him a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Met him at Gen Con, great guy. And he alluded to the fact back then that he had some big projects in the works. And he was able to tell us subsequently that he was working on some artwork for Magic the Gathering. And on Instagram, Alan Morris Art, he showed that his first card had been released. So it's the Conspiracy card from Assassin's Creed.
Oh, okay.
So it is a pretty cool image. My daughter is heavily into Magic, so I sent her the image and said, "Okay, what do you think?" And she could tell me, "Oh, that is a reimagining of an existing card, actually." And she said, "I like." He in her viewpoint, he definitely matched the general aesthetic of Magic cards, and she said, I really like his image much better than the previous one. So
that's a good thing.
Guess it's a win.
From an experienced Magic player, and it's an enchantment card, if I saw right. Is that correct? For our Magic the Gathering nerds,
it means nothing to me, but yes, you are correct.
And black, it's a black enchantment.
So he is, so that's the first of, I think there are several coming out. So.
Cool. Well, good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. And I'll have to track that card down. I don't really play Magic too much anymore, but I've got a large collection. But certainly when you have a Magic card drawn by or created by a person that you know, you want to have that.
Yeah.
So very cool. Very cool. So we received a email from a listener who's a very loyal listener, and we know him very well. Caleb Plague, our good friend.
Yeah.
Student, was a part of our game club for a while.
One of the kind of the founding student involvement in summer camp and all that sort of thing.
Yes, and he was part of what they deemed themselves, or they dubbed themselves as the original 7. They're the first 7 students to play Dungeons and Dragons in game club. So Caleb was a part of that. And so he sent us some feedback on our show where we talked about what to do when a player is absent. What do you do with their character? I'll just read a portion of his email where he shared what his group does. 1, he says the player can decide on who they want to play their character with a brief half-page to a page rundown of what they would like to do in certain situations. However, if the GM is chosen as the player, then they function like a mute NPC for that session. So that's one way they go. The other is the GM just removes the character from play in some manner. They do it a little different than we do. While they're traveling, they might become overcome with a sudden bout of motion sickness or something that keeps them out of the play.
Okay.
Or if they're in a dungeon in the middle of an encounter, they might be taken by a monster to a deeper part of the dungeon.
Oh, that's smart. That's a good idea.
That's kind of cool. I'm going to start thinking about how to use that. And actually, that kind of comes into play when we start talking about our Waterdeep recap next week.
Yeah.
But I'll save that for next week. But I want to say thank you so much, Caleb, for sending us an email. And if you're listening and you have a thought about the show that we're talking about, a topic that we're talking about, or just some feedback about the show, please let us know. Send us an email. Our email account is teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com, or drop us a note and follow us on social media. Instagram and Facebook are Teachers in the Dungeon, and Twitter X is @DungeonTeachers. So we're in summer, but summer is always capped off with a massive convention that we get to go to.
Yes.
And that is Gen Con. And so we just a couple of notes about Gen Con.
Less than 50 days away as of the recording of this.
Oh, yeah. I saw that on Instagram.
Yes.
They posted 50 days. But it's not the topic of today's show. But let's share a little bit of news from the Gen Con area.
So
our presentation is going to be during...
I might just leave that silence in because that was perfect. I didn't realize I was supposed to announce it. Sorry, I drew a blank.
I was just trying to toss the ball, and I apparently forgot to toss.
I just watched it hit the ground. That's what I did.
So we are presenting at Gen Con like we did last year during the trade day. And if you're attending trade day, or you're like, what is trade day? And you're a teacher or a retailer or a public librarian, I definitely think you ought to consider attending trade day at Gen Con.
At least once, yeah.
Yeah, at least once. And so if you do this year, we're presenting at
10 a.m.
10 a.m.
Right after the keynote.
That's right. And who we got to speak with yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
Here's a good English class vocab word. Through serendipity.
Oh.
We are speaking on a very similar topic to the keynote.
Yes.
So she was very gracious. So yesterday, as of this recording, we sat down and talked to her via Zoom and sorted out who's going to handle what subtopic within this bigger topic.
Right.
Of how to create a full-fledged community of gamers in your local community.
Right.
Integrating school game clubs, libraries, game stores.
Yeah. So that was fun to talk to her, and it gave us a nice focus for our presentation as we're building that. So 10 o'clock on trade day. Now, if that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, then our good friend Adam is going to be presenting at the same time.
Yes.
And
that was so unfortunate. I wanted to see this is his first time presenting, and
right.
They schedule us against each other. And because I'm just that kind of a person, I've been keeping tabs of how many tickets have been requested for each of our competing sessions. And Adam, if you're listening, we're tied, buddy. So
nice.
Good.
Well done.
So we're not at the top, but we're near the top. So
yeah.
It's exciting that people are interested in coming and listening to what we're talking about.
That's right. It is. So yeah, it's a bummer. I was hoping to be able to see Adam as well in his presentation. So yeah, get onto the Gen Con site if you're going to trade day. Look at the events if you have not signed up for those yet. And if our topic is interesting or Adam's is interesting, make sure you sign up for those 10 a.m. Sessions.
Yes.
Last thing about Gen Con is we will be there from Wednesday through Sunday. If you are attending Gen Con and you'd like to hang out with us, we would love to hang out with you. Let us know. Send us an email at teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com and let us know what day you're going to be there, when you have some free time, and if we can make it happen, we'd love to at least meet you, maybe have a little bit of time to hang out, maybe go down to the food truck area, something like that. But just let us know if you're going to be there, and we'd love to try to make some time to meet you and have a conversation.
We've got the events that we chose all scheduled, but there's some pretty big blocks of time here and there that are open.
Yeah.
So
right. So yeah, let us know. Gmail is the best way to do that. So okay, we are ready for our topic of the day, I believe.
Yep. So yes. So this is our creatures segment, and we had a reason why we picked one for each month.
Do you remember Aberrations? I was trying to remember.
I don't remember why we chose Aberrations for June. I have no idea. Something to do with the summer solstice and druids.
That's the only thing I could think of.
I don't know. We had a reason. We did have a reason. We did.
We did. We chose them all very purposefully, but
Like oozes in March when it's slimy and gross. So
and plants in May when things are growing, and so I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe it'll come to us. But as I was preparing, I kept thinking, why did we choose this for this month? Anyway,
this is a big topic.
Oh my
I feel like
it is.
we need to stay within our normal time frame. So we're definitely only going to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
Some of the sources I looked at throughout the stat that there are over 67 creatures in total. They range in CR level just in the official guidelines from 1/8 all the way up to 24.
Oh, you found a 1/8. Okay.
Yes.
I found a few 1/4 CRs, but I didn't see a 1/8. Okay, that's cool. And how many in the
over 67?
Over 67.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the only thing you may have more of a encapsulation or a generalization about the entire class, but what I found was essentially aberrations are where you put stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else.
There. Now that you say that, there are sometimes. So when I prepare for these, it's probably the most rudimentary, elementary fashion. I just literally flip through the books, page by page, and I just look at pictures, and I'm like, oh, is that one? Is that one? I was really getting caught up between what's the difference between an aberration and a fiend in a lot of cases.
Yes.
I thought there was a lot of overlap between what makes an aberration and what makes a fiend. But yeah, it does sort of seem like a catch-all.
Yeah.
And they do have similar characteristics. And there is... So I took from the Dungeon Masters, or from the Monster Manual.
Okay.
They have a little paragraph. I'll just read that.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what they say in the Monster Manual. It's on page 6 if you're interested. Aberrations are utterly alien beings. Many of them have innate magical abilities drawn from the creature's alien mind rather than from mystical forces of the world. The quintessential aberrations are, and I don't know if you want me to give this list or not, okay, because we might talk about some of these, are Aboleths, Beholders, Mind Flayers, and are they Slotty? Slotty. Those are all just pushover creatures right there. I mean, first level, you're taking on those types of creatures. Those are not the quarter or the 8th CR.
No.
Categories. And I don't know if we're going to talk about Slotty, but I don't know if you put us up against them, or did the dungeon dudes face off against? I don't know where.
The dungeon dudes did. I have not, because they scare me. I didn't.
They are deep. They are not just frog guys.
No.
They look like frogmen, but whoa, man. I figured that was something that you might dive into, but. If you don't mind, I'll start. I don't know. Did you have an organization for how you wanted to go through this?
I really
usually
didn't.
do, but I wasn't sure.
Just a few other generalizations I had about them.
Yeah, okay.
They do tend to be much more dangerous than other categories simply because they're so alien, particularly in game. It would be harder for the characters to know how to handle them.
Okay.
Know what's going to work, know what's not going to work. They are almost entirely evil, except for flumps.
Is that one of the 1/8s?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay.
I believe so. And yes, and they are very Lovecraftian, very Cthulhu type. Over and over again, you find images and descriptions that are like that, just wreathed in madness and decay and necrosis. Very old. I feel like just in general, just to start with the end, if you're going to put these in a campaign, the obvious choice almost always is a dungeon crawl.
Yes.
They tend to fit there much better than other places. You have to be a little more creative, I think, in putting them in others.
If you do any, interplanar type of campaigns where you're going to different planes of existence, doing a Spelljammer, Aberrations probably would fit really well into those types of campaigns. And in reading the descriptions of many of these, Underdark is definitely where they like to be. One of them, I don't remember which one it is. They were like, if they are not found in the Underdark, the only other place they would be is like a deep dark forest.
Yeah.
So when you think aberration, I traditionally, except for the flumph,
Yes.
I think of darkness.
Yes.
And I like the Lovecraftian Cthulhu feel to them because all of these definitely have that feel.
I will. How about if I just read the names of them real quick, even though we're not going to, just so you
Yeah.
get a feel for the wide range of
Oh,
things considered
absolutely.
aberrations.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Aboleth, Beholder, Burbalang, Slotty, Choker, Chewel, Cloaker, Cranium Rat, Death Kiss, Elder Brain, Flumph, Gazer, Gibbering Mouther, Grell, Intellect Devourer, Mind Flayer, Morkoth, Neothalid, Neogi, Nothic, Spectator, Star Spawn, Ulyssid. That's not even all of them. That's just a selection.
While we're at it, so as you know, I like the third parties, as we evidenced from my conversation last week with Andrew Catewood.
I was hoping you'd look into those. Yeah.
Oh, I most certainly did.
Cool.
And so from his monster books, I just grabbed a couple of them. I grabbed Monsters of the City and Monsters of the Underdark. And one cool thing that Catewood Publishing does at the end of their monster books is in an appendix or it's at the end pages, is he breaks them down by, he gives you page numbers. Does he give me page numbers? No, he gives me, he gives you the categories of monsters and what in that book is there. So you go to Aboleths, that's what we're talking about, right? Aberrations, and there's the list of aberrations. You go to Fae, here's the long list of Fae. And it's kind of cool, so you can, okay, this is what I'm looking for. So that makes it really easy to research these shows using his books. But I opened up the city book first and went to that index or that appendix, and not a single aberration.
Okay.
And I'm like, interesting. And I started there, by the way. So some of the things we've already shared about Aboleths, I keep saying Aboleths, aberrations, you would know that I probably shouldn't have started with the city book. Because then I went to the Underdark book and I'm like, oh, here's where they're all hiding.
Okay.
And there was a long list in the dungeon book. So I didn't write down all of them. I just put down a few here. And of course, we know with Catewood Publishing's books, their monsters sometimes have some nice wordplay that goes along with them, and they're fun. Just because they're fun, however, does not mean these are pushover creatures.
Right.
It's just fun for you, the DM, as you're putting together this crazy adventure. So he has a Blabberblub, the Feast of Burden, the Pillar of the Community, the Scarecase, the Shady Characters, the Swarm of Chessmen, Spellbinding Spellbook, and the Gloom Collector. That one really sounds like an aberration to me.
Yeah.
Gloom Collector, just by title, that just sounds really good. I found that to be really interesting when I researched that there are no aberrations in the city one, but now it makes sense after doing a little bit of research, going back to the 5e monster manual and looking at that introduction I read, and then looking at some of the monsters that were on the list that you just read from the 5e. So where do you want to talk about some of them?
So I guess I really embraced the whole chaotic does not match sort of flavor. And there is no rhyme or reason to my research. I just picked some
I love it.
to talk about.
Yeah.
So I've just got two major ones to talk about.
Okay.
And then one other one just a little bit. So how did you organize yourself?
I did the same thing. I just went through and I looked at ones that I thought looked cool. And I also chose ones that I was like, I didn't realize this was in the monster manual.
Okay.
I mean, that's one of the cool things about doing this project through the year by monster type or creature type is I'm coming across a lot of creatures that I just sort of fly by and I don't look at. This is really helped me.
And I would say, yes, part of why I don't know these is as I started DMing, these creatures caught my eye because they look so cool in the monster manual. But as I read what they could do, I rejected them all because so many of them are so bad. Yeah. Like they do things to you that are, I thought, when I was looking at these, I didn't understand the game as well as I do now. And my thought was, oh, I can't do that because that'll like permanently disease that character. And then what? You know? And well, no, that's the danger element. That's what you want. So, so I picked a couple that I thought looked cool that I was sort of disgusted or afraid of when I was looking to use them.
Okay.
And then as I saw them either in Dungeon Dudes or other places, or as I've gained understanding, I thought I'm circling back to them.
Okay.
So I'll just tell you the three, and then
all right,
if you want.
I was going to say, why don't I start with, and I'll start with one from Kaywood Publishing.
Okay, cool, yeah.
And then go back to, since I know I won't have any crossover on that with you. So I'm going to start with, one thing I was looking for was, okay, I really would like to find some mid-level to low-level aberrations, because that's where most of our campaigns sit. And I'm also always looking for creatures that a story can be told. This first one, when I discovered it and I read about it, I was like, okay, I've got a lot of stories floating around in my head about this one. So it is the Spellbinding Spellbook. A little description is, some sages believe that spirits from another world find their way into discarded books. So a wizard just tosses out a book, or a lore master, or someone in a great library somewhere in the land. This book is damaged, and so they just chuck it. And so these spirits find these books and inhabit these books, which is what gives it the aberration feel to it. Okay. And so inside these spell books are kind of reminded me of a mimic in a way, but it doesn't try to trick you. These things typically will fly, and they have a 60-foot flying speed. If they land on the ground, these spell books, these books, and if they land on the ground, they have a 10-foot movement. So you're gonna find them flapping around, pages going all over in the sky. The other thing that makes these really, really tough, by the way, it's a CR4. And again, Monsters of the Dungeon, page 19 is where this is found. They have innate spellcasting abilities. And I didn't write down all of them, but the one that I thought was probably the most useful to a book like this. Now, they can bite. The biting does very little damage, but it might be enough to get a book bite, to get a first, second level character sort of like, we don't want this around, especially if you're like in a library and it's full of these. That's where my mind started getting kind of crazy. I was like, what if there's a library of these spellbinding spell books, and they just all come flying off at a shelf at the party, and you have all of these just shooting spells at you. But the spell that they have, like, Thunder Wave is one of them, and there's a Scorching Ray I think they have that are just innate, and they're used like cantrips, I believe. No, I take that back. They have a limitation per day. But the one I thought was really cool is, a spell book will want to protect itself from other spells. So one of its innate spells is Counter Spell. Because I'm like, the first thing a mage will do, a sorcerer or a wizard or a warlock or whatever, they'll cast some sort of like fireball or scorching ray or something like that to burn the book up. Now, it doesn't have any resistances that I remember, but I don't know. I just thought that there was a lot of story that could go with this aberration. And so Spellbinding Spellbook is my first one that I wanted to talk about.
Okay. That is cool. Yeah, you could have so much fun with the personality of whatever inhabits it.
Yes. Yeah, right. I didn't even think about that part, yeah.
Okay, so I did more of a category. The first one is the slods. Those are ones that I looked at and thought, this is too mean. I can't do this to people. So the sloddy come in different colors: red, blue, green, gray, and then there's a death slod.
Yeah.
I don't know what color that will be. I guess whatever you want.
Gray, I think it was in the book. Or black.
Yeah. So the whole thing, they really build on the amphibious nature and how amphibians go through different stages.
Yes.
So just real quickly, the life stage of the slods, a red slod is required. They're the only ones that lay eggs, as far as I understand.
Okay.
And those eggs do not turn into red slotty. They turn into blue or green.
Okay.
And then blue slotty, if they attack you, they infect you, and you turn into a red slotty or some slot, or sometimes a green slot.
I kind of remember that. Yeah.
And then greens work and work and work, and they have to go through some metamorphosis to become gray, and then those eventually become death slot. And you work your way up as far as deadliness as you go through.
That's cool.
So they are purely chaotic. They come from the realm of limbo.
Yep.
And the thing that is so gross, again, is that they infect you with eggs by slicing you with claws. So there's something like Alien.
Nasty.
So body horror, a little bit in there. And so that's why I didn't want to use them, because I thought, well, if you fail that con save, you're in trouble. So that first of all gives a creep factor.
Yeah.
The other thing that makes them I think would make them kind of fun, and this was, I pulled this from The Monsters Know What They're Doing.
Ooh, nice.
He mentioned the green slods are more intelligent. They are magic users. And one of the things they do is they can cast major image. They can also alter self.
Okay.
They can also cast fireball. They can hurl flame. Shape change, sorry, not alter self. They can shape change to resemble humans. But he makes the point of saying, this is why I love Monsters Know. MonstersKnow.com, or The Monsters Know What They're Doing, is the book by Keith Ammon. If you guys aren't familiar with that, definitely give that a look. He is amazing if you're a DM planning a campaign or a character wanting to know how to fight better. Really good source. So anyway, he says that because these are such, yes, the green slod can shape change to resemble humans, but they're so alien that they don't know how to act human. So as a DM, if you've got a green slod that is shape changed, you need to make them act weird.
Yeah.
And they can't speak common, so they won't talk at all. They'll just have to sort of, honestly, what occurs to me, it just popped in my head. Galaxy Quest.
Okay.
When the aliens, they're sort of squid-like, but they look human. And when the character first meets them, what's the matter? Doesn't she talk? And well, her voice translator is broken, and then she goes. That's kind of what I imagine these would behave like, which could be really fun for role play.
Yes,
I guess. So, and the last couple things about him, real quick. Again, he mentions if you're using them in combat, what do? The red and the blue aren't necessarily looking to kill. They just want to claw everybody so they can infect or impregnate, I guess, if you want to be really gross about it. Yeah. And the green also do not want to. They've got their own goals. They're not really looking to. They're evil and they don't like people, but you're just a pawn to them. And if you are a difficult mark, if you get into fight with them, they want to die, so they're gonna get out of there unless you are in the way of something they want.
Okay.
And then it's not till you get to the death slot that, as the name suggests,
they're the ones want to kill you.
Yeah,
that's cool. They each have sort of their own purpose in their community.
Yeah.
Which are, all I could think of was like an ant colony.
Yeah.
Each ant or bee colony, they each have their own purpose, and that's all they do. Okay. I'm just picturing in my head like a dark cavernous with water dripping, encountering these things.
Yes.
And maybe even coming across something that's been recently infected and the eggs are inside of it and it's sort of incapacitated lying there, and you're like, what is that?
Yes.
And then they jump upon you. Oh gosh. Awful. All right. Well, speaking of awful, here's another awful aberration from the Monsters of the Dungeon from Kaywood Publishing, and that is the Gloom Collector. So the CR5 creature. And this is one where I looked at it and I passed by it and then I came back to it. So I was like, wait, is that undead? Is it a fiend? Is it an aberration? And it's an aberration. Okay. So it looks like it could be many different categories. So Gloom Collector is a 6th armed shadowy creature. So right there, shadowy creature, I think undead. That is an aberration. He does a nice job of explaining why the monsters are what category they're in. So he says it's an aberration from a ghostly world that's taken over some body or something like that. But it has a toxic touch that will draw or drain life force from its victims. And the touch can paralyze, and that's where the danger comes in. So it paralyzes you, and then it starts attacking you with the life drain because you can do nothing against it. And each time it hits you, it does damage. That damage lowers your max capacity until a long rest. So you can't heal back to full. And if it keeps attacking you or you're paralyzed, you get down to 0, you're dead. Like, no, because you have no max hit points. And so these things are pretty awful. And I could see something like this. This would be something that, in a very dark forest, a gloom collector hiding behind a tree that kind of picks on the person in the back of the marching order.
Right.
Or, the weakest one, it kind of creeps up on that one and just goes at it. I thought Gloom Collector looked really cool, and it's a great name for what it does. And so, yeah, that's cool.
All right, my next one, I'm going back to just oldie but goodie.
Yeah.
So next is Mind Flayer.
Okay, I was hoping you would talk about that.
And just because I came across, again, I'm going to read from The Monsters Know.
Yeah.
Because he is
very
talk
about those too? Okay.
So I just like his writing style.
Yeah.
So he said, Mind Flayers are like classic pulp supervillains. Brilliant, twisted, scheming, always wanting to take over the world. But first, they have things they want to do to your brain. They even wear outfits straight out of Flash Gordon.
They do, yes.
So he goes on to say that he doesn't like the way they've been created because they feel unsatisfying and it's not very efficient. He did not like the complement for as scary and awful as they're supposed to be. He didn't like the set of weapons they had. He felt they needed an upgrade. So illithid is another term for Mind Flayer.
Yeah.
And I believe it's the Githyanki that they're like butt heads with.
Yep.
So there's some good lore there if you're using that race.
Yeah, there is really strong lore there, but I can't remember which way it goes. I think the hate is mutual, but I think one caused the hate. But I don't remember which one, if it was the Githyanki. I think the Ithalids, the Illithids, I think they did something to start this. Like, I want to say even they created the Githyanki. I don't remember now. But yeah, there's a really cool lore to that.
So I don't have too much about them other than just again, from Monsters Know What They're Doing, how they fight. So the way that their complement of skills, they're the typical super villain. It's mental and magic, and they don't want to be in melee. That's not where they're strong. So they have a lot of mind-related magic spells. Their main psychic ability is Mind Blast, where they can stun you as well as do damage. They do have tentacles on their head, so they can do tentacle attacks in melee, and they do like to eat brains.
Yep.
So that's the really gross thing, is if you have that kind of a campaign and you have players that are into it, you can describe that process if you wanted.
There's a great picture in one of the books. I can't remember what book it is. We'll have to put it on our YouTube page. I'll try to find it. It's a very close-up picture of a man's head and face, and he's just in terror, like screaming terror, because above him is the tentacles of a mind flayer, like squeezing his head, and you can see that he's like getting ready to eat that nice adventurer's head. It's a horrible but great picture.
So what they said essentially though is that because they're not designed to be melee fighters, they will avoid that. They're super smart. So they will, because they're super smart, they'll have minions that are in the way. They will stay in the back and they will target people with Mind Blast. They will go after, and they can also try to take control of you. They can only do it with one creature, but they can try to charm a creature and make them attack their friends or whatever.
Right.
They said, and according to Monsters Know what they're doing, in that situation, they will target a ranged attacker, because ranged are really the only ones in that situation that can hurt them.
That would be dangerous to them, sure.
So that's how they will we'll do that. So they really are interested in self-preservation. So if things are not going well at all, they'll run.
They bail. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're alien. They're not seeing you. You know, there's not a personal, I must destroy them and get vengeance. It's just, well, they're in the way, or they're doing something I don't like, and this isn't working. I'm just going to go.
They always have larger plots.
Yes.
You know, if this isn't how I'm going to do it, then I'll find another way to do it. So I'm glad you brought them up, because I didn't research them particularly. There's some things I know about them, and you covered most of those. It's more I hate to call it community. It's their communal aspect, the hive that is fascinating to me. And I didn't do a ton of research, and I was kind of hoping you might have done a little bit more on this. But so here's sort of the hierarchy that I wrote down regarding mind flayers, because I think they're a fascinating creature. And you guys didn't encounter one in the sewers of Waterdeep. Well, you encountered one, but it was leaving. It was one of those situations. It was like, this isn't my goal right now. You just happened to walk into like the place where it was. And so it distracted you with an intellective hour, a couple intellective hours, and it left.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of their jam. But as a DM, and this is what I was going to say, I'll get to their hive here in just a second. But when I looked at that list of like Aboleths, Beholders, Mind Flayers, Slotty, I don't know. There's a little bit of, I don't know as a DM if I am good enough to give justice to those types of
I get that.
creatures. You know what I'm saying? They're so like legendary.
Yes.
That like I'm afraid to put a beholder in front of you, because what if I fail?
Yeah.
You know, what if you guys completely, utterly destroy it? And I'm like, that shouldn't have happened.
Well, and because they're so hyper intelligent, you need to be able to think, what is their plan? What is their plot?
Yeah, there's so much.
What are the things they would say or not say? Yeah, I get you. I'd be the same way.
I feel the same way with like dragons and stuff like that. But nonetheless, so if you go to the lair of or community of mind flayers, you will find an elder brain,
Right.
that sits or floats in this what they call a brine pool. And inside of this brine pool are tadpoles. Talk about the horror aspect
Yes.
here. So if a tadpole is implanted into a creature, you become a eulitharid. But if the elder brain is destroyed, which I can't think of anything more satisfying, but if you destroy the tadpoles, then they will start consuming themselves. Not themselves, each other. They'll consume each other. And then the final one, the survivor of that brine pool, then becomes the neotholid. Is that what you said? That is an awful. Did you write anything down about the neotholid? Okay,
There's just too many to choose from.
yeah, you can look those up, and both of those creatures are pretty awful things. But the neotholid is like, it's almost like a behemoth of some sort. It's just like becomes this incredible thing. And so I thought that was really cool and made me want to look more into it.
Yeah.
I think, is it the Monsters of the Multiverse that's described in?
I bet so, because I don't remember that from Monster Manual.
Yeah, I think it's.
And Volos is where the elder brain is. I do know that.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that. I think the mind flayers are fascinating. I always see them sometimes as like, you could play one as kind of like a bumbling fool, but only because he's so smart.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like he doesn't see the smaller picture, and so he keeps running into like, whoa, what? This shouldn't be happening. This is where, like a Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe or something like that. He's got his eye on the big picture, but he keeps messing up because he can't see
cool.
the obstacles or the hurdles. Okay. And so that could be amusing, but also scary at the same time, because even though he's a bumbling fool, he can still like kill you so fast. But I think those are really cool creatures. But I'm afraid to run them.
Yeah, I get it.
Do you have anything else?
I've got one more.
Yeah, go for it.
So the last one, again, real briefly, Aboleths. They're just another creepy monster. Now they're amphibious, but they're much better. They're much stronger in the water. So you'll encounter them there. They're smart enough not to get caught out of the water. So they're just horrible looking things. They're like eels with tentacles, lamprey eels with tentacles.
What aberration? What good aberration doesn't have a good tentacle, right?
So the consensus, though, is from reading about them is that most players, most DMs say they're not what they're cracked up to be. They're not as tough as you would expect. But it is really cool. The lore, I think, is what's the most fascinating, is that they are ancient creatures that predate the old gods, even within this. That they're not from another plane, they're from the material plane, but they also have like species memory. Like everyone's born with the memories of the entire. So every Aboleth remembers back to the time before in D&D the old gods.
Wow.
And so that gives them an arrogance and a bitterness that they're not more important and that they're kind of relegated to these underwater caverns and things like that. So they are extremely intelligent. They're extremely cruel. The main thing, they're covered, they're in the water. They're surrounded by a mucus cloud. So there's the grossness. That if you do a melee strike on them, that mucus gets on you and you might be diseased, which is gross. Yeah. They can probe you telepathically. They can know stuff about you. They make tentacle attacks. They're more of a brute. Like they're not afraid to get into melee. But if they attack you again, the tentacles can also distribute disease. And the other thing they can do is they can enslave you. That's kind of the spell that they have. And they can actually drain you psychically and take hit points from you and get them back themselves. Okay. So that's the main things they do. But they would be, again, a fun one to play, but you'd have to have a good sense of kind of bitter intelligence, I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Legendary creature. I've heard of them, but I don't know much about them. So that's cool. All right. I guess I'll do. I'll go into depth on one of them, but I want to mention another one. So earlier you mentioned in your long list the choker.
Oh yeah.
The choker. This is only a CR1, but the things that he brings to the table are seemingly would make him higher than that. So a choker is a humanoid creature, but it doesn't have hard bones. It's a cartilage creature, so it has it's like rubbery. Think of like a Stretch Armstrong or something like that. So what that means is that these things can like slide into like small spaces, like a fissure. Is that what that's called? Like a wide crack in a dungeon or something like that. So what it does is it will, if it gets you, it will, I think it suffocates you. I don't remember exactly now that aspect of it. But what it will do is it will take its last defeat, its last victim, and it leaves it in the corridor of the dungeon or the cave or whatever, and then it will slide into that crack right next to it, so that when you come, the party, the adventurers come, and you're like, oh, what's that? Oh, it will, and you go to investigate or to loot that thing, it will reach out of this, and it has these large kind of sucky hands. Oh yeah, it just grabs you and starts doing whatever it does. And why didn't I write down what it does?
Well, I think it probably will just
it
bite
sucks
her,
life or something like that. Yeah. The other thing that it mentioned about putting its like food or the bodies of things that is if it gets hungry while it's hiding, it'll just reach out and just grab a hunk of flesh from whatever's sitting there and eat it while it's waiting for you to come along. But
that could be fun as a DM. Have them roll, and if they roll a good perception, maybe rather than being surprised, maybe they see. Maybe you describe that. As a DM.
You see that. Yeah, that would be kind of cool to describe that. Here's another kind of cool thing about the choker is they are loners, so you're not going to come across a whole bunch of them together fighting in like the same fight. But if there is one, there's probably others someplace in the area. And one way you might know is if you've fought these before, is you might know that they're there because they will speak to one another with like moans or screams and screeches. And so you might be going through the cave or through the dungeon and you hear this like, and you're like, what is that?
Nice.
And just creepy like that. The last one I want to mention is a darrow. So these are dwarf-like creatures. It says in the description that it's unknown, but they could be descendants of dwarves. So we'll do what you want with that. That could be a story. They're a quarter CR, and so they're super weak individually, but you will typically find them in like hordes. And so if you come across one, you better get out of there because you're going to be like swarmed by these. And they can be very dangerous when you've got a whole bunch of them you have to fight. One of the things that makes them a little tough is you can't just drop a fireball on them. You can, but they're resistant to magic. And so something like that, or like chain lightning, could save them and give them an extra round of fight. If their hit points, they don't have a lot of hit points, but that magic resistance helps them a lot from those mass like damage spells.
Okay. So
we fought gazers. You guys most recently in Waterdeep fought a Grell.
Mm-hmm.
And so into like Devourers are in the movie Dungeons and Dragons, kind of in an amusing sort of way. It creeps by them and they're like, what is that? Oh, it feeds off of your intelligence. And they're like, offensive, because it doesn't sniff them out.
Well, and that was, you know what? That's another thing about that movie that they just did right, because you had a paladin, a sorcerer, a druid, a barbarian, and a bard.
Yeah.
None of those is intelligence-based.
No.
So it makes sense that it would not...
Yeah, and I like that they gave it sort of like a dog feature.
Yeah.
Like it walks around and is sniffing, like sniffing out your intelligence or something. Anyway, but those are all good examples of aberrations.
Yep. So we were totally aberrant in the way we went about this.
Yes.
Completely random. If you are interested in learning more about them, I did find on YouTube there is a channel called Nerdarchy.
Okay.
I don't know if they're still current.
Okay.
But they have a whole series of videos breaking down different aberrations.
Oh, nice.
So that is one you might want to look at if you're curious about them.
Cool. I like it.
But yes, this is one that I'm going to file this away in the back of my mind. I feel like for our season 4, we might want to revisit and pick out a few, because the lore is just so rich with these.
Yeah. Like your Mind Flayer and Githyanki.
Yes.
That'd be cool.
Yes.
And you've got the demons and devils and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be cool. All right. Well, another month gone by where we talk about a new creature group, the
Aberrations.
Aberrations. Thanks. I had to go back through my pages. I don't know why. Aboleths just sounds so much like aberration. But anyway, so, well, thank you for joining us today here on Teachers in the Dungeon. And so to quickly wrap up for Tom Gross and Dan Ream, keep rolling those 20s. We'll see you later.